Hey, what's up, friends and family and friends? This is the 364th Tones Take. This is my 364th video and the second to final video that I am doing for my entire life. Who knows? Anyway, I wanted to talk about the minimum wage hike because it is trending and it is actually an interesting article, an interesting topic to talk about right now. Minimum wage. And one of the articles that I actually thought I'd read from comes from Barron's.com. I have not sourced Barron's.com at all, but there's an article by Matthew Klein from December 6th of 2018 that I would like to point out where it kind of compares minimum wage to tariffs. And really quickly, my thought on minimum wage, I think it's great for people to make money, to make a living. But there are some pros and cons to minimum wage that I really don't think we always think about. A lot of people think that, hey, there are no cons to minimum wage. You pay people more money for the work that they do so that they can actually, afford the things that they need to survive. And while that might be true, there is also a caveat that many people buy things that they don't need to survive at all, and that we just continue to buy more and more because we live in a consumer-driven economy. So really, when you talk about a minimum wage, you're not really talking about what I believe should be a survivable income or a universal basic income, which is the money that you need to get the things that you actually need to survive. Minimum wage just basically says, hey, look, I work at a McDonald's, or I work as a teacher, I work as an engineer, and this is what we should get. And so far, in many states across this beautiful United States of America, you have different minimum wage levels, and they're all based on different rules, and they're all based on different classes of employees and things like that. It's a really mired and just completely confusing subject to even deal with, for me to even try to encounter myself. And there are plenty of videos out there about minimum wage across the US as well as minimum wage across different countries, and you'll know that minimum wage is highly different in certain developing countries, as you can see in this video behind me that's playing, than it is in the US. The minimum wage in many other countries is way lower than it is in the US. So basically, minimum income, I guess, is going to be around $15 for most places in the US. I believe there are 20 states in the US that are actually going to have a basic minimum income increase. And so let me just talk a little bit about some of the things that I worry about when we talk about minimum income. First, minimum wages transfer economic output from investors to workers. That's a great thing, because when we look at it now in the US, when we talk about the output, with economic output, dollars and cents, about 70% of that goes to the worker, the worker that's actually doing the work to be done, and then 30% usually goes to investors, the people that sit back and throw their money at stocks and get some income. In other countries, that's a lot different. You only get about 40% from, for workers in, say, China or something like that. That's one of the things that this article pointed out. Economists who support this transfer argue it is justified by systematic problems in the labor market. In particular, they note that employers often have far more bargaining power than workers, and that this imbalance has increased. And then they used an example from 2005 through 2009, where you had Apple, Google, and other large tech companies, with the exception of Facebook, who colluded to actually suppress the pay of software engineers. While a minimum wage would not have helped those particular workers, the logic is that waiters, janitors, retail salespeople, and other people in low-paying jobs are vulnerable and require protection from the depredations of employers. Basically saying that if business is let to be business, laissez-faire, we all learned that in 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade social studies. You learned it somewhere in between there. Laissez-faire, let business be business. And if you let business be business, well, the people that run those businesses are going to do really terrible things. I talked about that yesterday when I was talking about all the businesses that are going into the Congo and completely destroying and eradicating that. And so when we look at this, I believe that companies you can't let business be business. You do need to have some sort of government intervention to ensure that people are getting paid and that they are not at the expense of what employers decide to do, especially if employers start to collude with each other. I shouldn't say collusion, or Donald Trump might find this video and knock me out. Even those generally opposed to a minimum wage admit it can boost employment and job markets with a single employer. Economists also have a second, more sophisticated justification for higher minimum wages. Forcing up input costs pushes businesses to become more efficient, which ultimately raises living standards. Now, I don't quite agree with this. I mean, again, I'm not an economist. I took one 1 economy class at Penn State, and that was because I went to school to become an engineer, not an economist. So I know supply versus demand, but I really don't get this point. Forcing up, and so they say it's counterintuitive. It's counterintuitive, but there are some intriguing bits of evidence in its favor. For one thing, companies forced to pay higher wages do not seem to cut employment. There was a study done in the 90s where they said restaurants operating along the border of New Jersey and Pennsylvania, New Jersey increased their minimum wage by 20%, and they found no impact in hiring patterns on either side of the state line. And I find that hard to believe, mainly because when you talk about increasing your minimum wage, you talk about looking for ways to actually squeeze more out of the worker as well, so that, hey, if I'm paying you more, I also expect to get more work out of you. I'm not just going to increase your wages without somehow making you not just now serve the burgers, but you're also going to be sweeping the floors, wiping down walls. I'm going to make sure I get the most out of my money for you, you know? The other thing here is they talk about companies becoming more efficient. And this is the scary part, because we do have companies that have the ability to become more efficient. When you talk about big businesses like Amazon, like Google, these companies have the size and the scale to basically, yes, benefit from the minimum wage increase. Whereas smaller companies, we talk about Small Business Saturday after Black Friday and supporting your small business. When minimum wage rises, those small businesses, they're not big enough to actually become more efficient. So when that happens, they really can't hold on to those same employees if they expect to be able to pay those employees minimum wage. They have to, somehow shift focus, or they have to lose money in some other way. So in a way, this is actually going to benefit companies like Amazon, and that quite honestly scares me, because Amazon already has its hands in so many different things. A lot of these big major companies, these multinational companies that already run amok without really any government intervention, pretty much they just make these rules. So in a way, I almost feel like a lot of these big businesses might even have more of their hands in it than we think. We think that, the Walmarts and the Amazons and just, whatever the big major companies are that you can think of, we might think that this is actually going to hurt them, but it actually helps them, because now it ensures that competition from smaller companies, it becomes harder for those smaller companies to compete in a market. It will become harder, for instance, for a startup car company in San Francisco to compete with the General Motors and with the Fords on, autonomous vehicles, because, hey, that company doesn't have free cash flow anymore to provide to their employees if they have to pay them more. I have to pay my employees more, which means now I have less money to invest in the future. It's not going to work for them. So in a way, this helps the big companies that already have the bank account, that the money already banked to the side, to continue to do research and development. So that's my main reason for actually not really liking the whole minimum wage increase. I believe, yes, it might create a more efficient system, but it's also going to knock a whole bunch of small businesses right out of the job market, and it might in the long run create unemployment. Yet to see that. We already have really low unemployment right now, which is great. Trump claims responsibility. I believe there are also some vestiges from what Obama did. We can argue that day and night, but I'm not going to argue it here. But we will see. It'll be interesting to see what's going to happen in 2019 when these minimum wages do rise. I'm not going to read any more of this article, but I do encourage you to check it out. Again, it's on the Barron's website. It's by Matthew Klein from December 6th. So yeah, definitely check it out under economy and policy. Tariffs and the minimum wage are more alike than you think. It talks about tariffs. It talks about minimum wage. I would love to get everyone else's thoughts. I'll check out the comments and try to respond. This is probably the last video. Tomorrow I'm probably just going to say thank you to everyone. But for anyone watching today, thank you as well. And I will see you tomorrow for the New Year's Eve edition of Tones Takes. Take care and peace out.